É o seguinte, hoje a gente tem uma convidada muito especial para o nosso vídeo, a Victoria Schwab, autora da série Monstros da Violência. A gente acabou de lançar o primeiro volume, a Melodia Feroz, e por isso a gente mandou algumas perguntinhas para ela sobre essa duologia emocionante e assustadora.
Hi there, Victoria Schwab here. I am the author of a dozen books for children, teens, and adults, most recently The Savage Song and our dark duet, The Monsters of Verity duology, which follows Kate Harker and August Flynn, two teenagers stuck in a world where violence begins to breed actual monsters. Kate is a human who believes she needs to become monstrous in order to survive, and August is a monster who would give anything to be human. So what inspired me to create this story is a kind of a difficult subject. Here in the States, we've had a really bad rash of violence. I mean, it's formed a lot of our history, but especially in the last several years. And I remember watching the news and thinking, how can there be no aftermath? How can there be no change? And so, of course, being a writer, you try to process the world around you through the page. And being a fantasy writer, that you try to process it the same way. And so I thought, what if? Every author starts with what if. What if violence had an actual form, but what if it took a shape that could be fought, could be destroyed, but could also destroy you? And that was really the origin behind the Monsters of Verity series. Music, many people have noticed, is a very, very important part of the series. My Sinai, my soul eaters, the ones who are born out of the mass tragedies, can reap souls using a variety of methods, but their most popular method is using music. And August Flynn, my main character, one half of my main duo, uses a violin. And to be honest, I get asked a lot why there's music in the series. For me, I don't play an instrument. I've never been able to play an instrument. I have tried and failed numerous times, but because I can't play an instrument, it has always struck me as a vaguely supernatural thing, the alchemy of turning strings and fingers or keys and fingers into music. And because of that, I think of it as magical. So it was a thing I'd had in the back of my mind for a really long time. Can I write a story about the power of music or make music somehow magical? And then when I was plotting the Monsters of Verity duology, it just made sense to have characters who could bring the soul to surface, because I know when I listen to music, I may not be able to play it, but when I listen, it feels like something in me is surfacing. So Kate is not exactly a heroine, and I get asked a lot about the creation of her character and whether it's something I do on purpose, setting out to defy gender roles. Most of my female characters are Slytherins, I say. Most of my male characters are Hufflepuffs. I think it's more just that I want to see myself in books. We all want to see ourselves. And I was never the teenager who was willing to sacrifice everything to make other people happy. I would have killed to make myself happy. I was not a happy teenager. And I think your teen years are so hard anyway, and the idea, especially in fiction, when we give young women power, they have to be willing to throw it all away for other people. And I'm like, I'm Kate. I want to conquer the world. I want to be happy. I want to be stable. And she's willing, of course, to tear the world down to make that happen. And I just think I wanted to write characters who reflect our flaws as well as our strengths, so that they're not idealized, they're not set on a pedestal, they're real people, and they err and they learn from it. And I hope that we can too. So I write both YA and adult novels. I actually write middle grade YA and adult novels, and a lot of people ask about my process and how it changes and my routine. To be honest, I travel most of the year, and so I don't get to establish a routine per se for anything, but I also get a lot of people asking if it's hard to transition between the two. It's no harder than it is to transition between any two projects. So for me, the transition between two books is difficult no matter what I'm doing. It's no harder when I change age group or genre. The way I approach it is I'm trying to write for a different version of myself. So when I'm writing middle grade novels, I'm usually writing for 11 to 12-year-old Victoria, who was really morbid and dark. And when I'm writing my YA novels, I'm writing to 17-year-old Victoria, who was very morbid and dark and going through an existential crisis. And when I'm writing my adult books, I'm writing to whatever age I am now. So I just make sure I'm writing for myself. That's really the only difference for me, is what age of myself I am and what my focuses were at those different ages. But I like to think that I would enjoy them at any age. I think it's definitely The Savage Song and Dark Duet are the darkest ones I've ever written, which is saying something. People always assume that my adult books are darker, and I'm like, no, my adult books have all this hope and this whimsy. My YA books are by far the darkest things that I write. I think this Savage Song is the most existential thing I've ever written. It took on a lot of aspects of myself, both strengths and weaknesses. It took on the world that I saw around myself at the time, so it was definitely a hard book to write in that way. So there's a cast, but there's two main characters. There's Kate Harker and August Flynn, and they go back and forth between being my favorite and being the most frustrating. They're very difficult, and in fact, they reverse their roles in the sequel. So they became frustrating in the complete opposite ways. I can't pick between the two of them. They're both me. They both handle anxiety and frustrations and fear and ambition in different ways, but both of those ways are aspects of myself. I can't pick a favorite between them. Everybody loves August because he's my little Hufflepuff and he feels things really strongly, and I definitely care about him immensely, but he's also extraordinarily difficult to write. Whereas Kate, she's a little bit like a miniature Delilah Bard from the Shades of Magic series. I have a pretty good sense of what she's going to do, but she's still codifying as a human. She's codifying as a person, and so she provides some really interesting challenges too. Oh, that's a really hard question. Well, I grew up and I struggled a lot with body image and with eating disorder. I have really severe anxiety. I've had for most of my life, and I take medications for it, and it has really helped. I grew up in a household with an ill parent, and that was really difficult because you learn to kind of be the parent and not the child in that situation. Mostly the monsters that I'm still facing as an adult are self-doubt. I question myself every single time I sit down to write. I fear that I'm never going to be good enough. So those things don't really go away. I just sit down and try to do the best thing I can. But I question all the time. I question everything I do. I sometimes think that makes me a good writer, but not always like the sanest human. So if you follow me online at all, you already know this, but one of my favorite authors, and definitely one of my heroes, is Neil Gaiman. In fact, I've worn a bracelet for almost 10 years at this point that says WWNGD, what would Neil Gaiman do? Honestly, growing up, his work was an inspiration because I saw that he got to write different kinds of books and stories. He wasn't hindered, and I wanted to write all kinds of different things. I wanted to write poetry and novels and short fiction and screenplays, and I thought I had to choose. And looking at his work, I realized I didn't have to. As I've grown up and continued to read his work and to meet him, he's a lovely and generous human being. He's the kind of author that I aspire to be in terms of his interactions with readers and just the quality of his work, and I'm just a huge, huge fan. I am so excited to be published there. I'm so excited to get to share my books with you. You know, you can always find me on the internet. Everybody knows that I live inside of it practically, but I am just incredibly grateful that I get to be a part of your journey and you get to be a part of mine.
E aí, ficou com vontade de conhecer essa história? Antes de correr pro livro, curte o vídeo e siga a gente nas outras redes sociais. Até terça!